Ni hao, annyeong. Hello, I am the Dark Fae, and welcome back to Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. As always, if you missed the last session, I'll put a link for it up in the corner over here. You can go catch up on what you missed, come back here, and then find out what happened next. So, Blue Hair Fae is back now, and we are here with, I believe, session 28? No, 29? And this one's a bit of a doozy, so buckle up, get some snacks, get a drink, and let's get into it. So last time we left off, they had just entered the cave of this mysterious, dark, magic-y pool that Basil and Ivar, to a more limited extent, are currently experiencing. So, to reiterate some of my concerns from the previous round, it doesn't feel like they really know what they're getting into. Not a lot of healing to go around. See, Valkyria's kind of stuck in her beast form. As a druid of the moon, that is kind of what happens, but I feel like not being able to go back into your regular form to help is a bit of a limiting factor. And yeah, so they all kind of enter into this cave. So I'll put up the parts of the map that they had discovered here. And so basically, it's not super complicated, because I'm making these maps, it's hard to make very complicated maps, but a system kind of tunnels and some caverns. And so basically, whenever they went down a wrong turn or went down a wrong path, it basically would trigger what is essentially a phantasmal force effect. So by the time they go down the incorrect corridor, reach kind of the dead end, they have to roll an intelligence saving though, and for those of the party that fail it, they start seeing some kind of illusion. So on the first one, because they turned right, which is correct, and then they turned right again, which leads to a dead end, which is wrong. So I believe it was Umric, Basil, and I want to say Tyrell, because although intelligence saves honestly not strong across the board, but DC kind of 15, kind of difficult, because this is a difficult chamber and encounter, and it's meant to keep people out. So basically, out of the seaweed, you see this shadowy, skeletal hand kind of just crash out of seaweed, and another one, and it's kind of coming forward towards you guys. What do you do? Dealing with the first kind of thing, because these are illusions. Illusion spells state that players can use an investigation check against the spell save DC and to determine whether or not it's real. But I feel like I gave a lot of hints as to whether or not these kind of things were real or not. When Meriki tried to sacred flame it, he said that the sacred flame, it flashes in a burst of radiant energy, but it doesn't seem to affect it. It kind of just moves through it unaffected. Eventually they did end up taking damage from it, because this is an entity that would attack them and take damage. I also kind of hinted that when it strikes out at you, it doesn't really seem like it's causing any bodily harm or wounds, but the damage just seems to be mental, it's happening in your mind. I don't know if they're not aware of the mechanic, or if I should be the one to kind of tell them that this sort of a mechanic exists. But I also find it difficult if it's an illusion that you are very convinced of. Why would you go inspect it? Which is why I kind of gave those hints that it doesn't really seem to be hurting you. For everyone else, you're kind of seeing your three friends panic and nothing. And so I was hoping that the rest of them who didn't see this would be what the fuck's wrong with you? What are you looking at? And that would maybe hint that, oh, these things aren't real, they're only in your head, or only you are seeing them. But I sometimes have a little bit of a frustration that my players don't do a whole lot. They don't speak up a lot, or they kind of just wait to see what happens unless something's directly affecting them. So think eventually Umric kind of tries to attack it or something. I kind of forget, but he attacks it and it kind of just passes through harmlessly, and then eventually they kind of back out of that area and it dissipates. So then they keep on going. And before the illusions hit, I also mentioned that like you hear these kind of like whispers kind of start to come that are also kind of illusory, but to kind of like warn them that like something's happening. They keep going, and then come to another fork. One fork actually leads to the main chamber, and the other leads, the one on the right leads to another dead end illusion. They decide to go right. That's been the theme, going right. And so they run into another one, and this one, I say, manifests in the form of like one large, like bulbous, kind of bloodshot eye, kind of looking at them, like kind of oozing like pus and like slime and stuff. And like slowly among the chambers, like other eyes like start to open. And then from the stone, like these like kind of mouths start to like push against the stone, almost as if it were kind of like made of like a veil or some kind of like a curtain, and something's like trying to like push through to bite at them. This time, all of them failed the intelligence save. I think Tyrell missed it like by 1. He rolled a 14. Maybe I should have lowered the DC, but again, this is like a difficult boss chamber, and I feel like it should be difficult since it's set by a certain goddess. So they all fail, and so now they're all seeing these things, and so I think their first instinct is to run. As they run, things follow them and like deal more damage, another 2d6. So eventually, they tell Basil to like beseech the ring and the voice in his head as to what to do, kind of. I have him roll, I think I forget what it was, a religion check or something, or insight. So he rolls, and it kind of helps him by like moving his arm for him and like putting it through an eyeball. And so to him now, I say that like once you see your hand kind of like pass through it, and you start to now it's like this illusion is pretty evident to you that these things aren't real, and now they become like faint and they don't really seem to be snapping at you anymore. I guess that wasn't clear enough because it seemed like he still thought it was affecting him, so he tried to attack it and then used like 1 charge of his psychic blades, which is like you can add 3d6 at this level psychic damage to a melee attack. So I was like, okay, again, trying to reward creative uses of their abilities that they don't always know all of somehow. And then, so I was like, okay, roll damage. He rolled psychic damage, so I said, like, in a small radius, it kind of seems like your psychic interruption kind of expands outward, and the eyes and mouth seem to vanish in a small radius. And, like, then the rest of you guys kind of seeing Basil, some of them seeing Basil, like, put an arm through, seeing this kind of thing disappear, then get the sense that this is some sort of illusion magic. I guess at that point then it kind of fades away for everyone. Illusion is weird to handle, and it's also, I feel like, I really like them, but I feel like my players like have a hard time with dealing with them, or like how, like knowing how to deal with them. But anyway, so now with the illusion kind of dispelled, they all go up to this, the second path, which is like to the final chamber, and this final chamber is like around like 40-foot diameter circle, kind of a domed cavern. It's like filled with like waving seaweed that kind of obscures the area, and in the middle there's a stone pedestal with like a purple orb sitting in it. Basil, at this point they're all kind of hurt a little bit. I think I rolled maybe a total of like 18 damage, maybe. So some of them have around like half that, depending if they failed both saves or just one. But so Basil rushes in because this is his thing, and then no one else follows. So he's the only one in the chamber. And so as soon as you enter the chamber, the orb activates, basically. It senses like the presence of kind of any living creature, and it will activate to defend itself. And the way it defends itself is through a sort of a nightmare manifestation, our guardian. And this is something that like I've introduced through Basil and Ivar, but he's never there. Dreams and visions. So I don't know. I found it concerning that Basil didn't really seem to warn any of his friends about what was going to happen, or didn't really seem to know what was going to happen himself, or the fact that even metagaming wise, I don't think any of them remembered his dream where this chamber, glowing orb, shadowy figure being dueled with a Warforged looking entity. I don't know. So he goes in, and basically the creature that forms, it's like a in the Fiend Folio it's called like a Wastrelith, but this is one that I like heavily homebrewed unaltered. So it looks wise, it's like a Wastrelith. So it's got like a kind of a long, heavy, kind of like fishtail with like fins protruding out of it. This kind of like emaciated torso with long arms that kind of end in these like very wicked looking hooks. And then it's got kind of like gills and like kind of like a barracuda like mouth with lots of like needle like teeth and just like one central like acidic yellow-green eye. And this encounter, which is designed to be difficult, basically everything that could have gone wrong for them did. And I have pored over this, like concerned if I had made this too difficult, if I was just unfair as fuck. But like comparing this to like the dragon eel and then like some of like the other encounters that I've either done or like DM'd or fought as a player, I don't think it's that bad. I just think that this was like the first encounter that they did not or could not prepare for, and that their players just happened to get stuck in a very bad situation. Also, it's going to turn into like combat analysis of this. I'll explain what this creature, the Drowned Guardian, kind of is all about. So if you don't care much about like monster stats and stuff, you can maybe skip ahead a little bit. But so the Drowned Guardian, and maybe like other DMs, if you like are good at building creatures and like measuring stats and stuff, let me know how I did, if it's too difficult or if I'm being unfair. Like, I don't think I am, but who knows? Like, I find it kind of the equivalent of like fighting some adult dragons, and those are like AC 11, 13 or so, but this is, I think, AC like 10 maybe. Anyway, so it's CR 10, 11, 10 maybe. So the Drowned Guardian AC is 16, which is, I feel, pretty low for a party of level 6 characters. Kind of their range of like have attack bonuses ranges from like +5 to like +8. Hit points are a little bit higher. I kind of scaled it a little bit given we have a party of 5 to 190. Its speed is like 50 feet of swim, but not that I expect it really to need it. Stats, strength is, it has low strength. It uses more of its like dex for its hooks. Dex is 18 +4, con is +3, intelligence +1, wisdom +4, charisma +3. And it has bonuses to a lot of the saving throws because it's a very magical effect, like, thing, and it's not really like a living creature. It doesn't have like a blood system, and it's not like living. It's like a manifestation of like some sort of a nightmare. So that's why I also gave it like immunity to poison, because it doesn't really have a system to be poisoned. It also has resistance to necrotic damage, psychic damage, because it's again very focused on the mind, and also like kind of necromantic-y. I also meant to give it resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magical weapons, but then I forgot about it, so slash that. And then it can't be charmed, frightened, petrified, or put to sleep, because it's, again, kind of construct, like mental construct-y. Anyways, its abilities, it has one is magical resistance, so it has advantage on saving throws against spells or magical effects. It does have spellcasting. It's a level 6 caster, so it's got up to level 3 spells. Those aren't super like damage dealing, no like fireball or like lightning or anything like that. Most of it's like phantasmal force, hold person, enemies abound, cause fear, that kind of a thing, with a couple like Hunger of Hadar, and maybe like a thunder wave for very situational purposes. And then the main ability that I wonder if it was a bit too difficult was Fearmonger. So Fearmonger is one that I kind of made up. So basically, if there's any frightened creature at the top of their turn, they'll take 2d6 psychic damage, which on average is like 7 or so. 2d6 psychic damage, and the Drowned Guardian then heals that much. Like, the whole theme of this kind of series of Guardians is kind of based off of like things in the dark and like fear and like madness. So this thing, yeah, the big thing about this is like fear-based. So then for its actions, the Drowned Guardian is kind of a combination of 3 creatures. It's a combination of a Wastrolith, a Marrow Shallow Priest, and a Sea Hag. So it has a lot of abilities, but that's also meant to kind of let me balance the action economy kind of in-game if I feel like it's doing too much damage, or if it needs to cause a certain effect, then it has a lot that it can do, but it's also limited to like one or the other, like dealing damage, casting a spell, or it's Death Glare, which is from the Sea Hag. So if a creature is frightened, you can target that creature. This DC I lowered a little bit, so it's a DC 14 Wisdom save for the target, the frightened target, otherwise they drop to 0 hit points. And then for its attacks, it has an Acidic Spout, which I said could, it's a DC 15 strength save, and it can either push or pull the target up to 60 feet, and then it takes 3d8 acid damage, or half on a failed, half on a success, and it's not moved. And then it also does have multi-attack, so it can use its spout and then attack 3 times, which is taking from the Wastrolith. It's plus 7 to hit. Bite is 2d10 plus 4. Claws are 2d6 plus 4. Yeah, and then it also has lair actions. So at initiative count 20, losing ties, basically one of 4 effects can happen. Either one is a pulse of fear, so everyone in the chamber has got to make a wisdom save. I think DC 16, more difficult because fear is the whole mechanic, and that's kind of what the magic is focused on. Or they become frightened. They can save at the end of each of their turns. Entangling vines, the seaweed, and the kelp kind of reach out and restrain people on a failed strength save, DC 15, or they, like these thorns, emit like a noxious poison, DC 15 con save, or they take 2d12 damage, half on a success. Or if there are any frightened creatures in the chamber, then at that lair action, these like shadows kind of emerge from the the walls and as like more entities to fight, and they basically are like shadows in the monster manual, but I did tweak them a little bit. So I think they had 16 or 18 HP, which I think is the same. Their AC is 14, which is again pretty low. And I think I gave them a +6 to hit. Maybe should have toned that down to like a +5. But and basically instead of a strength drain, it's a wisdom drain. So like this whole chamber is designed to like cripple your wisdom and make you afraid, and as such, like the chamber will grow stronger after that. But that's kind of a trade-off for they're supposed to be like small creatures, pretty easy to deal with. They don't do a lot of damage. I think I did 2d4 damage or something like that. So here comes combat. Everyone rolls initiative. Guess who goes first? It's the Guardian at an initiative of 23 because I rolled a natural 19, then +4. So then it becomes Drowned Guardian, lair actions, everyone else, and guess who's last? Basil. And guess who's first in the chamber? Basil. So also, because he has the creepy ring, and he's the one that the Guardian sees as like trying to break this seal, essentially. So he's going to be the target for like this whole combat. He's the only one in there. None of his friends went in with him. Because I don't know, they didn't know, and he didn't tell them, and I don't know what they expected. So it uses its acidic spout, lands all 3 hits, because Basil's armor class is 13, which means I have to roll a 5 or lower to miss, which I don't. Fails the strength save also. So, literally in the very first round, very first turn, Basil goes unconscious. So I don't think that's like unbalanced or something. It'd be like, like a breath weapon, like, and you fail your save, you get like a shit ton of damage done to you at once. This creature is best taken like when it can like distribute its attacks amongst a lot of people, but he went first. Only one person in the chamber. When all of the attacks are focused on one person, it can do a lot. So basically now with Basil unconscious and this thing kind of still targeting it even though he's unconscious, like I don't like, unless it's like super called for, I don't like the idea of like a creature just going in at an unconscious person to kill them outright. I'll maybe do like one attack to get them down to death saving throws and then have them roll the rest. And so my thought process is like there are still other threats kind of in the caverns, so it wouldn't necessarily finish Basil off, it would address the other threats that are coming in. But so Basil is one of the healers of the group, and so now our cleric, Umrig, is kind of stuck on heal duty. Like, Basil goes down basically like every round, and then he's got to bonus action like heal him back up. And so because he's using a spell, he can't really do a whole lot other than like maybe hit with his warhammer, which is not his strongest suit. And I don't know, it just ended up being like, so he couldn't really be utilized to his full extent. Valkyrie as like an octopus has a plus, I think, not very high, like a +3 to hit. And she just kept she hit once and then just kept rolling really low. She also kept on like darting back in and out of the chamber to avoid the lair actions, which is smart, but also like difficult to help your team with because it provides like one less target, for the enemy to either target or to kind of like help spread out its attacks. And then, I don't know, our Warforged fighter doesn't like to cast spells, so he's just also swinging away. Our other fighter swinging away. They were also just ended up somehow rolling really poorly. I felt so bad for them. Like, AC of 16, they definitely, like, did not hit as much as they probably should have. And so they really didn't do a whole lot of damage to it. And then eventually, and I know that, like, 4 attacks seems like a lot with this creature as it's, like, hitting, but then there are some turns where it's, like, it casts a spell, so it actually doesn't even do any damage, but then the lair action is kind of, like, what makes up for it. So I feel like the action economy of this creature was actually pretty decent. But so at some point, round 3, maybe? Round 2 or 3, instead of attacking, as the Drowned Guardian then casts Cause Fear, because fear is a big thing about it, and it helps it a lot, actually. But it casts at 3rd level, and I target Tyrell and Ivar. It was Basil, he was up at that point, but then he went unconscious, losing the fear, but the fear had kind of already taken hold. So the 3 of them, basically, they all fail. And so then, at some point, like 3 shadows come out, and they're all different. They kind of are like manifestations of like people who might have accidentally wandered into the chamber before and died, or something like that. So they're all like vaguely humanoid, but shadowy and dark, kind of like the Guardian is. And so now they start to attack as well. Normally, you know, in like boss fights with like little minions, you kind of ignore the minions and go after the big bad. Which I normally agree with, but in this case, it can punish you really hard if they hit and then drain your wisdom, and then you have to make more like wisdom-y saves. It can be difficult. So eventually, with kind of the Fearmonger ability, where it kind of siphons HP from those that are afraid, and then also rolling not great on some saves, and these things kind of attacking people. I think our cleric and our druid are now down to like 13 and 11 wisdom each from 18. And then Tyrell and Ivar are also down a couple of points, though their wisdom wasn't super high to begin with. So eventually, they've only like net done, I want to say like 50 points of damage to this thing. With some healing, to be fair. It did heal like 18, 20 something points of damage. But like, after that many rounds, with 5 players, that's not anywhere near enough to being able to kill this thing and survive. Basil, I think, went down like 5 or 6 times, and they kept bringing him back up. And then eventually, though, Umric went down, and so now their main source of like ranged healing is gone, because Valkyrie can't turn back into a druid, and otherwise she risks drowning. I mean, she can maybe for a turn, but it'd be hard. So they're just like trying to juggle players, and at this point trying to get out. So Valkyrie squirts like an ink cloud into the chamber, and now with the ink cloud, everything's obscured and everyone's blind, essentially. I had it rolling as disadvantage, but I forgot it should actually be an even roll, because the attacker is blind, but then so is the target. So I'll fix that for next time. But eventually, like through some very desperate kind of plays, they are able to get everyone out. I feel bad whenever it's like a potential TPK situation, because then I feel like I did something wrong as a DM. But I think in this situation, they definitely all could have died. But I also think there was enough like logic, or there was enough intent around this like chamber to kind of like scare people away, drive people away, that I felt like it made sense that as soon as they like all kind of started to flee and move in that direction, that the Guardian and the shadows would kind of halt and just kind of, and like let them go, because like I don't feel like it's their it would be its like main goal to prolong the fight as well and like risk more damage, it would try to get them out. Yeah, I don't know. I just need to work on like me for sure, like committing to a player death if the situation should arise. But that's kind of what I felt in the moment, and that's what I did. So eventually, they all kind of flee out of the cave. People unconscious. They make it a ways to like where their dinghy is parked, and Valkyrie brings up Umric. Changes finally back into a druid, heals him, and like tells them to go back down to kind of bring everyone back up with water walk, since a lot of them are either unconscious, Basil's unconscious, with a rope of climbing tied around him from Tyrell. Basically, wrap up is like, he tries to go down, but like doesn't know where they are, so he requests Valkyrie to go with him. Valkyrie's like, okay, I'll transform again. And then she rolls her percentile dice and transforms into a death dog instead of an octopus, because she rolled the percentage needed for one of her like corrupted beast forms. So, not a good day for our druid. And eventually they all get back to the dinghy, and up out of the water, take a short rest as they row back to the ship where Kartab and the other people from Bulga are diving, get back on the ship, and they can take something of a rest until it's time to go and fetch the other Vikings from the ocean. So this was I don't really know now what their plans are. They don't seem like they want to go back, which I completely understand. I just don't know, like, if our character, like, the player forgot, which maybe I should ask if the player forgot or if it's just Basil who doesn't want to share. But I also don't want to, like, as the DM, like, micromanage anyone's playstyle or, like, constantly remind people of, like, what they know or what they don't know. I feel like that's kind of on them, as well as knowing what their character does and can do. Because, like, I know all of their abilities, pretty much, because I'm a DM and I know, and also just playing D&D, I, like, read manuals and shit for fun, so I, like, keep track of what a cleric can do, what a druid can do, etc. But, like, for some reason, I don't think my players know. Like, and I don't understand sometimes how they cannot know. But then, like, and it's at these points, it's like, well, I inherently know, but I don't think as a DM that I should, like, automatically count it for them just because I know, if that makes sense. Like, I want them to tell me that, like, oh, I have this ability, therefore this happens. But that doesn't really seem to happen. Like, I'll remind them of some stuff like, oh, you're like, you have a weapon bond with this, or like, you have a resistance, so you ignore this damage. But if like they have some sort of cleric ability or druid ability or bard ability, something that would like ignore resistance or give them advantage or something like that, I don't think I should be the advantage one maybe, but like, because I'm the one telling them to roll, but some things like that, I don't think I should be the one to be like, and because of this, your spells do max damage or something like that, you know? So this session felt, I just like, all the time I was like, please just do this, or please tell them this, or please, you know? But this is also like the first encounter, or like very difficult encounter or enemy they faced without prep. They were kind of down like one or two characters like throughout the combat, which made it just way more difficult, I think, for them. And I would say that like having a mostly melee, kind of mostly melee group It's tough. It's tough doing stuff without magic. You got no AoE, no debuffs, buffs. Yeah, especially since they had started the day thinking, we're just gonna do a nice treasure hunt. And then it turned into I guess they still thought it was a treasure hunt. And so that's why Cleric and Druid didn't really have any combat spells prepared. Cleric didn't have Revivify prepared, and I was terrified that somebody was gonna die. Basically, after very long combat, I'm wondering now if that will maybe force some inter-character interaction. Please roleplay instead of saying, hey, let me pull you aside, and then just go into a long metagamey conversation about what they should do and why. But I also am not sure what they're going to do about their current wisdom scores. Because as of right now, the Cleric and Druid, which are wisdom-based classes, are kind of incredibly average. And a long rest, it's not gonna bring their wisdom scores back. Basically, think they either have to somehow get a greater restoration, or they gotta go back. But I don't know how to introduce how they would know that they have to go back. Hard to say. Anyways, so that is, I think, session 29, maybe it's 28, I can't keep count anymore. But thank you so much for watching. This is a very long one. Hopefully in the next one my players will have a sense of what they want to do and won't be too put off with these guardians in the future, because there are more and may be important for Basil in his ring. So don't forget to comment, and subscribe for notifications when I put out videos. And I love you all, and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.